Welcome back to Fast Market here on the Schwab Network. It's time for our cash tag segment. For that, let's bring in Landon Swan. He's a co-founder at LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Landon.
Thanks. Great to be here.
All right, so we're talking another airlines. I know we talked about one last week, but Delta, which is sometimes considered, having the best balance sheet out of the major carriers here, but it was a choppy 2023 last year. We had highs near $50 before sliding down to $30 in this stock. I mean, it was still up over 20% last year, but what kind of data are you seeing? Because if you just go by TSA data, everything should be fine for these airlines, right?
Yeah, everything should be.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, Delta's always been one of the top two for us. It's always been Delta versus Southwest. And I say always, but that goes up to about 2 Christmases ago when Southwest really screwed things up. So now Delta has sort of emerged. And, we talked about United, how they kind of rose to the top after Southwest fell off. But, they've had their problems lately. I mean, doors falling off and emergency landings. They had an emergency landing today in Florida due to a door light malfunction or a warning. And so now you've got American as the number 2 behind Delta, and it's sort of as out of default, not because they've done anything right, but because Southwest and United have kind of fallen off. And so Delta remains at the top, unblemished, and the clear leader out of the top 4 airlines. So a very strong company. We love this company, and they're doing the best as far as happiness goes. And you generally speaking, you should be pretty just happy when it comes to airlines, right? They're getting you from point A to point B. Things shouldn't go wrong, but you lose luggage, you have delays, all this. That's what brings down the happiness. And of course, Southwest is still struggling to to get that consumer confidence after what happened with their antiquated scheduling system and all the drop flights that they had 2 Christmases ago. So way behind, but Delta continues to do really well. In fact, one of the things that they're seeing is the demand for premium seats. So if you look at their revenue on a year-over-year basis, their main cabin seats were up 12%. Their premium were up 17%. They talked about this in their earnings report. People want nicer accommodations. And I think we mentioned this when we talked about United. So across the board, people are seeing this. And I think that's another reason that Southwest is actually going to fall behind, because they don't have anything premium. Everything is the same. So Delta is offering more. They're making their customers happy. And even when you look at web visits, Delta is the clear leader. I mean, the change in the year over year for web is phenomenal. So they're the only ones in double-digit growth at plus 15%. You can see where United and American are. They're second and 3rd%. And the big concern, as I keep mentioning, Southwest, -9. So they have fallen from grace. I mean, again, the story was Delta is the business leader, Southwest is the individual, personal consumer travel leader, but not anymore. And so this move from Southwest has now established Delta as the clear number 1 leader, because again, all the others are sort of falling off. Also, with all the problems around the 737 MAX 9 from Boeing, that's pretty much limited to Alaska and United. So those problems that we're seeing not affecting Delta. Everything that we've got on this company says it's the best. And then it's just a question of, where do you think the travel industry is going? So we've got good numbers from TSA. And I think there's some concern from people that maybe that'll cool off. Maybe inflation will cool off. Are they going to have that pricing power in the future? And based on the happiness, the answer, I think, is yes. Delta has the best pricing power out of anyone, because they're making their consumers the happiest. So therefore, when you're deciding which airline to fly, you're going to be willing, to pay just a little bit more for Delta, because for whatever reason, they're the ones that are keeping you a little bit happier. You're more willing to fly on that airline. So of the 4, Delta's definitely the strongest for us.
Landon, Delta's going to set the tone for the rest of these airline companies in a year where there was record-breaking holiday travel and the busiest year in aviation history. Well, they also have Ed Bastian, who's a great positive delivery mechanism for their information to the markets. The markets always seem to like Delta on their earnings. That doesn't mean they will tomorrow, but he does a great job of delivering the message. Couple things, though, that you mentioned. You're right. Their focus on premium seating is bringing in more revenue per seat. And they may have a couple good things going for them, like the fact that crude oil prices have come down during the fourth quarter. should lower some of their expenses. But I know I get the positivity in Delta. It's also rallied from $30 to $41 during this period. When, Landon, is my question to you, when does a company like that's so horrendous in your data like Southwest, because say it all the time, some point I want to be short a name, some point I want to be long it. When does it look like, are you seeing any turnaround in Southwest data?
Not yet. No, we just, I mean, that's the short answer. We're not seeing it. We're seeing the only one of the four. They're the only one of the four with the negative demand mentions that we're seeing. They're the lowest on happiness, and not by a little bit. I mean, 7 points below the next and 13 points below the leader. So really struggling. And they're at that sort of magical 50% mark. You don't want to be under 50%, where customers who have an opinion are more likely to have a negative opinion. That's a bad spot to be in. I mean, that's, you're talking about Spirit Airlines then when you get into those lower numbers. So you don't want to be associated with that kind of company. I agree. Everybody is a buy at some point. Everyone's a sell at some point. But when you look at these four companies in the airline industry, they've all had a nice little run as of late. And so, if it was just Delta screaming to the top with their stock and everyone else sort of flat, then, my tone would be a little bit different. But they've all sort of done well over the last little bit. And we know that, a lot of that's based on, like you said, crude oil prices and just travel demand overall with TSA numbers. So for me, it may be the best play could be a pair trade where you're long Delta and short Southwest, because they've all done fairly well, but the data is just so much better on Delta than it is on Southwest. So to me, that's the easiest play. But moving forward, if you have to get an opinion on just Delta, because of the run up in the stock price, it's muted our score somewhat, from negative 100 to positive 100. We're about a plus 20 right now. So we like the company. We don't love it because it's ran up so much, but the data supports the run up. So that's sort of the long and short of it from LikeFolio.
Yeah, and that mentions chart that you have, Landon, I kind of wanted to zero in on that because year over year, it still looks like it's up 20%, but over the last couple months here, it's kind of come back down and met where the stock is. Is that a warning sign, or is this part of seasonality? What do you attribute this to?
Sure, it's a little bit of seasonality. They had a nice run up over the holiday season that we didn't see at that large of a run up over the last holiday season. And it came back down, and there's actually a pretty big divergence there between the stock and the mentions. So the demand there was, it was telling us, hey, this stock is very undervalued as it got into the low 30s. We're no longer there, and they're kind of matching up. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, where it muted our score, right? If it had stayed at $30, we would be much, much stronger, and I'd be pounding the table saying buy Delta Airlines. But now it's more fairly priced. I think there's more room to the upside than the downside. And if I had the opportunity to pair it against one of the others, especially Southwest, I think it's a very solid, it's a plus EV trade at that point.
Yeah, and last time they reported earnings on the 12th of October, crude oil was about $83.50 a barrel, so more than $10 off. And that's when they were giving warning signals about fuel prices that they were going to have to pay.
Yeah, that has to show up in the numbers, right, for the fourth quarter?
It might, because we've seen quite a pullback. All right, great stuff, great data. As always, Landon, appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right, that's Landon Swan, co-founder at LikeFolio. Kev, going into this